On this special edition of In the Gun, it's time to take an in-depth look at the Mountaineers signal caller from the signal caller. We'll break down Garrett Greene in a two-part episode here. The first part being Garrett Greene, the runner. We'll discuss on this edition of ITG.
Let's go!
You are now watching Believe.
Keeper, Greene, lowers the head into the end zone. Touchdown, West Virginia. And Greene breaks loose. Garrett Greene.
It's time for a special edition of In the Gun, your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Euler with the best teammates in the business. It's going to be myself and the signal caller, Jed Drenning, on this edition of ITG. The first part in a two-part special on the Mountaineer quarterback, Garrett Greene. Episode 1 here. I mean, I don't know, that really sounds like Star Wars when I start to say it that way. The first episode here is going to be focused on Garrett as a runner, and a few days from now, we will release the follow-up on Garrett Greene as a passer. So, Jed, this is a special edition of ITG, as I've said. I don't know if there's a lot of names, quirky, goofy, dad joke type names, like, you know, we could make a Green Day joke here, obviously. These are the Green Day episodes. These are the, the GG files. We're about to bust into the Green Book. There we go. That's the one that I'm looking for. And I know you are very excited to break from one signal caller to another. I know you've been working on this offseason, and you're excited to get into this breakdown here. Again, this episode focusing on Garrett Greene, the runner.
I might have played the same position as Garrett Greene, but I'm not the same species as Garrett Greene, right? And that's kind of what we're going to get into in this first episode of this special presentation. But I like your episode 1, almost like episode 1, The Running Menace with Garrett, right? There's one of those dad jokes. Here we go.
Let's just hope Jar Jar Donaldson doesn't make an appearance.
Since Garrett first arrived on campus, a couple things popped out about him. First of all, the ball jumped out of his hand. I mean, anytime you could watch him in pat and go, and he would get your attention, and just in terms of his arm strength. But the other thing was how twitchy he was. Now he's put some weight on with Mike Joseph since he got on campus, obviously in the last handful of years. But even before that, he's always just jumped out as being twitchy and quick and explosive. And he was that guy that, even a couple years ago when Jarrett Doege was still here as the starter, you had to find ways to get him on the field for certain packages just to take advantage of his skill set. And I think we started to see some of that take another step last year. And when you look at the raw numbers, first of all, 772 yards as a runner. He rushed for 13 touchdowns. That tied for most among FBS quarterbacks. His yards per carry, 6.4, pure production, number 2 among Power 5 quarterbacks. He forced 14 missed tackles. That was the most among Big 12 quarterbacks. We're going to get into some of these numbers as the show goes on. But the truth of the matter is, he brings so much value as a runner in different ways. I mean, we're going to discuss on script, off script. We're going to discuss the value he confers to an offense on third down as a weapon. If you just want to call plays and run the offense at large in the middle of the field, we're going to talk about Garrett as a red zone weapon. And then we're going to kind of wrap things up by talking about what happens and the value he brings when under duress, he decides to tuck it and extend a play, or tuck it and scramble for positive yards, because that, in my estimation, is probably where he's the most lethal. But I think you've seen this kid who early in his career, Wes, was nothing but a raw and pure runner. But now he's more refined, even if we just confine ourselves to that dimension of his game. We're going to spend the whole next episode talking about Garrett the passer, what he's good at, what he needs to work on, areas of opportunity. But when you just look at him as a runner, he's a more disciplined and productive runner because he's more comfortable within the confines of what we're trying to do.
Certainly is. I think that's a great way to put it, a productive runner. And I'm excited to get into all of the angles of this, the X's and O's, the ebbs and flows in this edition of ITG. Of course, as always, brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online, where the game begins. Jed, yeah, it's, where Garrett Greene is, the episode 1 thing again here. You went with the Phantom Menace reference. If I were to steal a New Hope reference, Garrett Greene has kind of become the new hope of a hopefully resurgent Mountaineer football program here. But the journey just for me to watch him that he's been on, and how many Mountaineer fans, myself included, never really viewed him as the chosen one to bring balance to Neil Brown's offense.
Wow, we're going heavy.
I'm sorry. I'm being goofy, but I'm being honest, right? Because when he first got here, it was Jarrett Daggy's team, right? And then and then shortly after, the Mountaineers signed this highly touted recruit out of Denver/Arizona named Nico Marchiol, who was throwing up on the football on ESPN while he was leading his team to a multiple touchdown comeback in the fourth quarter. And it was like, great, we got our next quarterback. And this Garrett Greene guy's fine, and we'll use him in some packages, kind of like what you were saying. We'll get him involved. But Nico's our future. And then what happens? Daggy ends up leaving. They go and get JT Daniels, who's, oh my goodness, here comes this guy from Georgia and USC, and he's a 5-star, and he's a monster, and he's a professional, and he's going to elevate this offense. And it ends up being Garrett Greene down the stretch who gives you the hope and the momentum rolling in to 2023. It ends up being Garrett Greene, despite missing a little bit of time there early in the season from the backyard brawl in the Texas Tech game with that injury, who really helped this offense take off down the stretch. And so, yeah, I just wanted to point that out because I was thinking about that as well, too, is many different times as we've thought that he wasn't the chosen one, that he wasn't the new hope, that it was somebody else. While meanwhile he's been there working and getting better and being a very viable quarterback here in the Power 4 now, and a guy that you and I think has really got a chance to captivate and have a great season.
Yeah, I mean, we kept feeding him opportunities, and he showed flashes, but he never maximized those opportunities, not until last summer leading up to camp. And that is when he started to come into his own, found his comfort level as a quarterback. But I'm so glad that you mentioned Nico, because that quarterback room at large has to make you feel pretty good. Because here's Garrett. Yes, he's getting smarter about protecting himself in traffic. But you've heard Neil voice those same concerns. There are still times you don't want to peel him back too much and take away who he is.
Sure.
He's a junkyard dog. He's going to lean into trouble. He's going to put his body in harm's way. So you hate, knock on wood, as always, but at 5'11", 201 pounds, a kid who averaged 10 rushes a game last year, there's a fair to middling chance Nico Marchiol is going to have to do once again this year what he did last year, step in and win some football games for us. So, yes, this is about Garrett these next couple episodes, but also I'd be remiss if I didn't address the quarterback room at large and what a central role Nico could play in that, and really fortifying things for us in the bigger picture of the position. So I'm glad you brought that up. But we have, if you want to cue it up, Wes, we got a series of videos that I had a lot of fun doing this. It was a passion project. It was a lot of work. But
I just want it to be known, Jed put more time into this than any homework assignment he ever had when he was growing up. All right.
Easily. But I break it down several different ways. The first thing we're going to do is take a look at breaking down some third down and short yardage situations. And I just think Garrett's such a tremendous asset and could become more of an asset if we lean into that and he polishes a couple things up in 2024. So that's the first one we're going to take a look at, Wes.
That is the first video we're going to take a look at, and we'll do that in just a second after we give a thank you to Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Big shout out to JR and everybody there at Team Toothman for all they do for the WVU student athletes and NIL, and of course for presenting your new favorite WVU football podcast. All right, Jed. Garrett Greene on third downs as a runner. Let's roll the tape.
I want to pop the hood on a zone read wrinkle that really showcases Garrett Greene's athleticism. Neil Brown deployed it here against TCU, and the first thing I noticed, this is third and intermediate. It's a 3rd and 6. It's not 3rd and short. That's one of the things that Garrett's skill set gives you, the ability on 3rd down to access the run game portion of your playbook, not just on 3rd and short, but also in 3rd and intermediate situations. And as we'll discuss later, there are even times on 3rd and long that Garrett's legs can help bail you out offensively. We have a situation with the ball on the right hash, the Mountaineers in the shotgun, offering up a trips left to the wide side of the field. The flow of things, coupled with the read by Garrett, is going to take the action back into the short side, and a lot of what unfolds on this play is going to be heavily predicated on the reaction of TCU's boundary tackle in the Will backer lined up in the box behind him. Right tackle Doug Nestor is part of the wrinkle. Against a more conventional 4-man front, that backside tackle would seal the linebacker, putting the quarterback in position to read the unblocked defensive end. But this isn't an even front. This is a 3-man front as part of TCU's odd front defense. So instead, what you see Nestor do is arch block out to find a threat on the perimeter. This leaves Garrett to read the unblocked defensive tackle, the boundary tackle. The Will backer aligned behind that tackle is also a threat, because if he doesn't bite on the flow of the stretch play to CJ moving away to the wide side of the field, then that backer might be in position to scrape over the top and make a play on Garrett if in fact Garrett does keep the football. We get a good mesh and a good read by Garrett, who uses his explosiveness to get to the edge and fight his way past the sticks for the conversion. Terrific execution and a good call by West Virginia. Running the football is a game of angles and leverage. TCU had its front kicked to the wide side of the field. Running the ball back into the boundary gave the Mountaineers the chance to outflank the Frogs, which they did. The truth is, the two TCU defenders put in conflict could have played this a lot worse than they did. Defensive tackle Paul Oyewole stepped into the gap and used what some DL coaches call the shuffle technique, reading the mesh of the fake while staying square. At linebacker, Shea Banks, meanwhile, bit on the stretch action to CJ Donaldson for just a step before recovering. Against Garrett Greene's speed, that proved to be a pretty costly error. Banks and Oyewole combined for 13.5 tackles for loss last year. In other words, these were exactly the type of defensive playmakers for TCU that were accustomed to taking care of business in situations like this. One more variable that makes this play by Garrett, which showed up in the box score as an unremarkable 8-yard run, all the more impressive. Let's jump into another 3rd down and intermediate, in fact another 3rd down and 6, this one against Oklahoma State just across midfield. Another example of Neil Brown going to the quarterback read run game, but this time it's off the jet sweep action. Now for a quarterback off the jet sweep action, things happen a little bit faster, so it's not a true mesh like it might be on the dive option or the zone read to the back out of the shotgun. This is more of a put the ball in the belly of the jet sweep receiver and kind of shuffle over as you make your read. So to try and sync things up from a timing standpoint, coaches generally try and have the quarterback have the football snapped with the slot receiver somewhere just outside the tackle box. There are a couple different things you could do with your single back in this concept, including have him fire aggressively downhill to the wide side of the field as a lead blocker on the perimeter. What you are not going to have him do is what played out here for West Virginia. This was obviously a missed assignment on the part of the single back who thought he was part of the read equation and was trying to achieve a mesh relationship with Garrett Greene, and he kind of got things jumbled up and got in the way, and this could have very easily been a catastrophic result on a very critical 3rd down. Instead, Garrett didn't let it affect him, and he kept his focus on his keys, which took his eyes where they needed to be, enabling him to see the crease open up on the second level of the defense. He slipped through and found more than enough daylight for the 1st down. We all know that things on a football field rarely go entirely according to script. Seeing your quarterback flash the ability to stay locked in and make things happen when things go sideways around him is always a promising sign. Let's jump back earlier in the same game last year against Oklahoma State. This one's a 3rd and short, approaching the Cowboys' 30 in the first quarter. What we're going to explore here is how, against a heavier box, in this case Oklahoma State, has 7 defenders sniffing the line of scrimmage, a quarterback as athletic as Garrett really expands your options in the run game. West Virginia brings motion from the wide side into the boundary and zone blocks at the point of attack, washing out a heavy chunk of the Cowboys' defensive front. But OSU still has 3 defenders left with a downhill posture toward the boundary, where Garrett Greene is about to take off with the football after pulling it from his mesh with CJ Donaldson. One of those 3 defenders will be secured by CJ as he fires up field off the play fake. Meanwhile, tight end Traylon Davis launches out of his spot in the wing to secure OSU safety Kendall Daniels, and motion man Hudson Clement works his way up to scrap with the final defender on the perimeter. This clears a path for Garrett to break, contain, and get upfield, easily making his way past the sticks for the first down. When I see the WVU offense execute at this level and see it paired with Garrett's playmaking ability and explosiveness, it really is a true peek through the window at what an unstoppable Mountaineer offense could look like. The key, of course, is to not just show it in flashes, but for the balance of 60 minutes every week.
Not sure if that's Jed Drenning or Chris Collinsworth on the telestrator there, but fantastic stuff, Jed. So let's get into some of the numbers here. Garrett Greene as a 3rd down runner.
There's a lot of metrics available that can really support what you see on tape. And that's one of the things I try and do. When something seems a certain way on tape, you want to look at the numbers and see if the numbers support that.
That's what I love analytics for as well, too. Yep.
Absolutely. So Garrett Greene, here's the first one to start with. All carries total. Garrett converted a first down. He moved the sticks. No matter what down he was running the football, he moved the sticks 43.3% of the time last year. Wes, that was number 1 among all Power 5 rushers at any position. So he put you in position to find rhythm offensively.
Sure.
But then when you get into the 3rd down, even on 3rd down, 45% of the time, he moved the sticks when he took off or he was a weapon or asset in the run game. That was the 2nd best number among Big 12 quarterbacks. You're going to see in some of these situations, he does a great job. I think it's not stated enough how physical he can be once he lowers his shoulder and fights to break tackles and gets yards after contact. I think that's an undervalued part of his game. I think it's misleading because of his size, but he does run hard. There's so many different things you can do. You saw in some of the breakdown, Neal would get jet sweep motion going, play off of that, really get a triple option effect going into some of that. So the athleticism and the burst and the explosiveness, not just is Garrett a weapon when he keeps the football, but as we'll discuss throughout the course of the show, he's a weapon that keeps the defense honest and really helps the rest of the run game chug along. And when you can force the defense to play 11-on-11 football, we'll talk more about that when we get into the red zone portion. But he's an asset whether he's running it or whether he's not running it, just because he keeps you honest. So those are some of the things to consider when you're looking at 3rd down, short yardage. If you want to hum along, now don't read too much into any 3rd down numbers with Neal Brown, because Neal's one of those guys that if it's 3rd and intermediate, and you'll see some of this on some of these tapes that I'm breaking down. You saw it against TCU. 3rd and 6, he doesn't hesitate to go with his own read.
Right.
Why? Because he knows that if it's 4th and 2, he might in fact roll the dice, keep the offense out there and run forward anyway. So even if it's 3rd and intermediate, with a quarterback like Garrett, the run game is still a very big part of your arsenal. And if you don't have a dynamic quarterback that's a runner or a running threat, you got to throw the football on 3rd intermediate. That's not always going to be the case with a quarterback like Garrett. So that's what we got there with.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. And that is, I mean, listen, if that was what he brought to you in the run game, you would take that. That's the mobility element that you want from a quarterback. But guess what? He's got much more in the arsenal. He's got much more, a plethora more to give there. We're going to discuss Garrett Greene, the runner in the midfield, Garrett Greene, the runner in the red zone, and then Garrett Greene, the runner when it's time to scramble. So still plenty more to get to as we roll along with this special edition ITG episode focusing on Garrett Greene, the runner. You are in the gun.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
Back in the gun here, this special edition of ITG focusing on the Mountaineer quarterback Garrett Greene. First part here on Garrett Greene, the runner. Jed, we know how effective Garrett Greene is at moving the sticks when he does decide to pull the ball down. I guess I should say on designed runs as well, too. We know the effectiveness there. Nobody as good as he is having a nose for that first down marker when he does run. But we also know, obviously, he's got the big play ability as a runner as well, too. He's got the explosiveness, that home run hitting ability in his arsenal as well.
He absolutely does. And from anywhere on the field, it opens your entire playbook and puts you in position to do so many different things. And one of the themes that we're going to stick to over the course of not just this episode, but even into the next, when you can do these types of things and you can become such a formidable running team, especially on early downs, guess what that complements? It sets up big play opportunities in the play action pass game. And that's really when we reinvented ourselves offensively with the personnel that we have. I would say a year ago with Chad Scott, with Neil Brown, that's kind of what we've done. We're a very physical, punch you in the mouth at the point of attack football team that leans on you on the ground. But at the same time, we become such a potent force running the football, especially on first down, that we take our shots on first down as well. And it sets the stage for those types of things to happen. But yeah, the fact that Garrett opens you up to so many possibilities, no matter where you might be on the field, different ways to get creative when you run the football, that's another thing to get excited about, Wes.
Absolutely is, Jed, and I think it might be time here to roll the tape once again as we've got another breakdown from you, a little film study video on Garrett Greene, the runner in the midfield.
Duke's Mayo Bowl against North Carolina. It's 1st and 10 early in the fourth quarter with WVU operating from its own 22. Neil Brown again uses jet motion to activate the quarterback run game with a pin and pull concept that capitalizes on the athleticism of center Brandon Yates by featuring him as the pulling offensive lineman. We can probably expect to see more things like this in the fall, with West Virginia putting Yates in space to seize on his own skill set, which is obviously different than Zach Frazier's. The key Tar Heels who West Virginia targets here are the edge defender to the wide side of the field and the inside backer. Triggered by the flow of the jet sweep, both defenders attack the perimeter on the snap. This allows Brandon Yates to seal off that play side backer, creating a lane for Garrett Greene to make the read off of his shuffle and take off upfield with the football. This brings Garrett into the second level of the defense, and given this kind of space, he's always going to make some magic happen. Explosive plays like this off jet sweep action don't happen overnight. They take incredible timing, making them rep intensive, and are only optimized with a dynamic playmaker handling the football. Let's jump to the Cincinnati game, first quarter action, and this is going to be another 1st and 10 run. Probably not that surprising in the sense that West Virginia's first down run rate last year was a chunky 65%. That helped set up the first down play action game that produced so many splash plays for this offense throwing the football. Nothing too fancy here conceptually. Basic zone read scheme with Garrett Greene reading the Bearcats defensive end on the left to the wide side of the field. If the defender steps upfield, Garrett gives to the back on the stretch play into the boundary. If the defender steps down or pinches, Garrett keeps the ball and runs to daylight with tight end Cole Taylor leading the way. One little wrinkle here as West Virginia motions the slot left all the way out to the wide numbers. This compels two Cincinnati defenders to widen out as the formation expands, helping create what will become an alley for Garrett to get upfield with the football. Good call, good read. We see Garrett's burst, and he does the smart thing at the end by sliding in safely to protect himself. All right, now let's talk some gap scheme. Another 1st and 10, this one with West Virginia operating in its own 22 against Baylor. The Mountaineers motion into an empty set with C.J. Donaldson exiting the backfield to park outside the numbers to the wide left. On the other side, WVU offers up a quads look with 3 receivers out wide right and tight end Cole Taylor in a wing position. On the snap, the Mountaineers attack with a quarterback counter, again trying to get Garrett Greene to the second level and cause damage with his legs. Right guard Jaquay Hubbard, uncovered against this Baylor front, pairs up with Cole Taylor to pull left, with the two serving as the tip of the spear on this counteraction. Hubbard kicks out the Bears' edge defender, and Taylor follows through the open gap, climbing to the second level on the hunt for a gold Baylor jersey. Garrett slips through into the secondary, weaving his way for a big pickup. The little things matter, and part of what sets this all up is Garrett getting the 3-receiver quick screen out to the wide right, a quick glance as he lets the counter develop. This subtle action by Garrett helped freeze linebacker Matt Jones, the Bears' leading tackler, just enough on the snap to enable left tackle Wyatt Milam to climb from his double team on the defensive tackle and seal Jones off from the play with a technique that would make Ric Flair proud.
There it is, Jed. Garrett Greene across the midfield. Green grass and high tides forever, some might say, as I continue to try and make these bad, corny pop culture references. But talk to us a little bit more here about some of these numbers, Garrett Greene, in terms of the explosive big play ability.
It just puts you in position as a play caller, if you're Neil and Chad and this offensive staff, Matt Moore up front, to do so many things creatively. Because the defense is going to be so hyper-focused on his threat to at any point, anywhere on the field, tuck it and go. Here's a couple more numbers to reinforce some of what we're seeing. If you got the sense last year that we had a lot of drive start or a lot of first downs in which Garrett tucked the ball and boom, next thing you know, we got another first. We got some rhythm going. We got a drive going. Garrett Greene averaged 8.3 yards per carry on first down, the best among all Big 12 rushers. Now, as a designed run threat, this forces defense to defend every gap, every blade of grass. It enhances, as we talked about, the rest of the run game. And this opens things up to the full complement of zone schemes, gap schemes. Zone read without an athletic quarterback is different than zone read with a guy like Garrett. Like, you can still run zone read if you don't have a dynamic runner, but you got to commit other resources and personnel to doing it. For instance, a zone read is all about, without getting too technical, Wes, holding that backside defensive end. We call him a 5 technique if he's lined up on the outside shoulder of the tackle, the offensive tackle. You're holding him by virtue of your read. Now, if you don't have a quarterback, like back when we had JT Daniels, he wasn't scaring that 5 technique, right? He could crash plus react in time to take JT down before JT kept it. So what Neil would have to do, even sometimes with Jared Dagey, you'd see this as well. He would have to send jet sweep action to that side to hold that 5 technique. Now you have to commit another resource. But with Garrett, when you're running jet sweep, look, that's a luxury. It's not a necessity. That's a third read. You're running triple option football. You don't have to deploy that. You can just go straight zone read, as we've seen some on the tape breakdowns. But the other thing to consider, if you want to be a truly, truly dynamic and national leading rushing offense, you can't really do so without this type of quarterback. The numbers bear that out. Let's talk about Avon Coburn very briefly. Avon Coburn is the career rushing leader at West Virginia. No Mountaineer in history. He rushed for over 5,000 yards. No Mountaineer in history was more consistent year in, year out for 4 straight years in piling up big rushing numbers than Avon Coburn. From his freshman year to his senior year, he was consistently productive and never really had a downturn in terms of his production. Now, let's think about this. The all-time leading rusher in the history of the school. Every year, he was putting up big rushing totals. You want to hear where West Virginia ranked nationally when Avon Coburn was here? His freshman year, we were 63rd. His sophomore year, we were 64th. His junior year, we creeped up to 36th. Now, guess who was inserted a little bit but hurt most of that year? Rasheed Marshall. Now, The next year, when Rashid's the full-time starter, you have a resource in addition to what Avon Coburn is doing. Now you're number 2 in the entire country in rushing offense. That's the impact that these types of quarterbacks have. Because without this type of quarterback, you're going the long way around. These are hard yards. You have to earn every yard with just your old-fashioned run game. So when you have this type of player, it makes life a little easier. Every call doesn't have to be perfect. We'll get into the fact later that he can bail you out of some tough situations. But these are just some of the things that this type of player, this type of runner behind center, Mountaineer fans aren't rookies here. We've seen this. Some of our biggest successes have come with guys playing this style of football. Now, let's hope that's the case this year, but pretty exciting stuff when you look at what he can do from anywhere on the field.
Certainly is. I love the examples that you give to back that up there. The Avon numbers are certainly that's a fantastic stat pull there by you, signal caller. I love it. And it's a great point to drive home as well too. It makes a lot of sense of what Rasheed Marshall was able to unlock for that offense as a whole and how those things complement each other.
Not to interrupt, Wes, he's explosive. That's the last thing I want to add here. You see that in the middle of the field more than any. He had 11 runs of 20-plus yards. That was first among Big 12 quarterbacks, second among some guy that happened to win the Heisman Trophy last year as far as Power 5 quarterbacks. So the big play returned in the quarterback run game there. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to insert that. Yeah, his numbers, hitting double digits in the 20-plus run game out of the quarterback, again, that's high-level production.
It absolutely is. And again, if you're getting one of these things, if you're getting the 8 yards a clip on first down, like we talked about, if you're getting the third down conversion percentage, like we talk about, you'll take those things from your quarterback. But wait, there's more, Jed. This is a lot like, since this is a special edition of ITG. We didn't really do a headline segment on this, as this is kind of more of an evergreen episode that's not really supposed to be time stamped. This is kind of a off-season leading into the season type special edition thing here. But it does also bear to say, our guy J.J. Weatherholt was drafted in the top 10 of the draft recently by the Arizona Cardinals. He's called a 5-tool player, right? You like how I worked that in there. Well, when it comes to Garrett Greene,
you said Arizona Cardinals.
Oh, I did say Arizona Cardinals. That's football. St. Louis Cardinals. Thank you.
There you go. That was Dante.
Thank you. That's unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be teammates with Dante Stills there in Arizona. The other
Cardinals everywhere.
The Cardinals everywhere. That's exactly right. So Jed, not only is there the third down conversions, not only is there the big play explosive ability, there's also a red zone weapon within Garrett Greene and those legs and the ability that he has as a runner.
Yeah, there sure is. And this was when I was going back to try and select which plays or which examples might show the most. I was hard pressed to kind of narrow it down, but I settled on 3. And I think each of the 3 kind of show different types of things because, as we'll talk about, when the field shrinks, the most productive offenses, and this is an area where West Virginia necessarily has to take a step this year, but we've shown promise in the past. Because of our ability to push people around and our physicality in the run game, you have to be able to push people around when the field shrinks like that. And we were at times able to do that. And the asset of Garrett as the 11th guy, forcing you to play 11-on-11 football, did truly at times serve as a major weapon for us.
Yeah, you are 100% correct. Listen, there's a reason why if you listen to offensive coordinators speak at times like this, right, Jed, in the offseason when they're kind of doing broader conversation at the NFL level, at the collegiate level, so often, almost every single time you'll hear offensive coordinators talk about getting better, getting more efficient in the red zone, because that is such a difference between being able to punch that thing in for 6 and in the extra point as opposed to having to settle for 3 points. It is massive. It is the difference between winning and losing games. It is the difference between coaches keeping their jobs and getting fired, the difference between champions and decent seasons. Your ability to convert in the red zone, like you said, when that field shrinks, that is something that offensive coordinators who are paid millions of dollars spend hours and hours and hours trying to figure out and trying to improve. So that is absolutely something that we don't want to downplay in terms of his skill set.
We don't.
Or not even downplay, but just make sure we're not underselling is probably the better way to put it.
Sure. The red zone is in many ways the putting green of football.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
it's where your
There
money's
you,
made.
there you go.
It really is. But again, it was difficult to select just this short list of examples that I broke down in this tape. But there are so many more that I could have used. But here's what I ended up rolling with. If you want to cue it up with.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll talk specifically about some more of the numbers on the other side, but here's Jed's breakdown of Garrett Greene in the red zone.
At the UCF 7-yard line, ball on the right hash. West Virginia lines up with a formation strong to the field, wide left. This splits UCF's defense with 6 defenders to the field where the Mountaineers are showing heavy numbers, but only 5 defenders to the short side. The Mountaineers don't intend to use those 3 receivers to attack the wide side. Instead, with motion, misdirection, and route combinations, they'll work back toward the boundary to actually outnumber the soft side of the Knights' defense. Garrett Greene is going to take the snap and get things started with a zone read, threatening that wide side with C.J. Donaldson on the same stretch play WVU has used to gash UCF all day. Garrett's read key on the play is the boundary end, but the flow of the outside zone in the opposite direction by CJ, coupled with the success West Virginia has had with that play all afternoon, gets both inside backers to react to the wide side. Back near the goal line, Knights free safety Damari Henderson will be frozen by the stretch fake for just a beat. He'll react back over toward the boundary when he sees Garrett keep the football. Garrett fights through the arm tackle of UCF edge defender Tremon Morris Brash, the Big 12 leader in tackles for loss, then bulldozes through Henderson into the end zone for the Mountaineer touchdown. Morris Brash actually defended the play well. He recognized the development of the zone read and stepped into the gap with a wide base to neutralize the threat of Garrett running the ball. But when sniffer tight end Traylon Davis crossed his face into the flat as the third part of this triple option play, Morris Brash was forced to expand with him, and Garrett was too quick for the defender to have any chance to get back inside in time to make the tackle. Garrett might only be 200 pounds, but this is exactly the type of deceptively physical running that helped him force 14 missed tackles, most among Big 12 quarterbacks. Big boy football here on this 4th and 1 inside the Cincinnati 5 early in the game. Right guard Jaquay Hubbard and tight end Traylon Davis pull left to lead the way. Hubbard executes the kickout block, using his 125-pound weight advantage to smother UC safety Brian Threets. Outside backer Daniel Griesiak, meanwhile, learns the hard way that you should never scrape too high with Traylon Davis bearing down on you. Two of Cincinnati's 3 second-level defenders bit hard on CJ's run flow to the wide side of the field, while the only remaining linebacker, Dorian Jones, lost sight of Garrett in the chaos and overstepped his run fit, allowing Garrett to burst into the end zone for the first points of the day. Later in the Cincinnati game, WVU on the fringe of the red zone in the final minute of the first half. From a trips left look against just 5 Cincy defenders in the box, West Virginia dials up the zone read back into the short side of the field to the right. Garrett's read key is Bearcats defensive end Jawan Briggs, a Cleveland Browns draft pick this past April. A perfect mesh by Garrett and Jaheim White has the Cincinnati defense scrambling to find the football. Briggs and linebacker Dorian Jones both bite hard on the stretch action to Jaheim. Garrett keeps the football and easily escapes into the secondary, leaving the Cincy safety reaching for air as he races into the end zone for another Mountaineer touchdown.
That boy's shifty, I tell you what, Jed, without a doubt. Twitchy, jitterbug, athletic, whatever term we want to use, depending on what's cool on the given day. Garrett Greene in the red zone. Give us a little bit deeper here on the numbers before we go to break.
Like you saw on the tape, when you see things like a well-executed zone read at a high level, I mean, the offense can at times look unstoppable. it's just a matter of you have to do that down in, down out, the balance of 60 minutes, week in, week out. But when you look at the red zone numbers, once again, they support what you see on tape with Garrett. Let's start with this. 43% of Garrett Greene's red zone carries went for a touchdown. That was the highest in the Big 12. 10 touchdowns, 23 rushing attempts in the red zone, highest in the Big 12. Now, that's not just the highest TD percentage in the Big 12, but we've talked about it forcing the defense to play 11-on-11 football. We talked about Garrett being an asset even when he's not running it, just because of the threat of him running it. Well, Wes, there's good news, and I don't even call it bad news. I would say something to build on to follow this up with. West Virginia, as a team, numbers tend to shrink when you get in the red zone because everything shrinks. The defenders have the back end as a 12th defender, so it's tougher to play offense. It's more congested. It's tighter. So no big play opportunities to drive up the numbers or inflate the numbers. West Virginia's yards per carry as a team, Wes, in the red zone last year, 3.3 yards per carry. Now, to give you some frame of reference, if you look at the 16 teams in the new Big 12, that was toward the top. That was number 3. So we were among the best. Now, think about this, Wes. Despite the numbers I just told you with the 43% being a touchdown when Garrett ran it, Garrett actually dragged that average down. In the red zone, Garrett Greene averaged 2.8 yards per carry. So there's opportunities to improve on that. Now, if you go back and look at all 23 red zone snaps, which I have, there's a narrative to support part of that. I mean, first of all, he lost 5 yards and 3 kneel downs in the red zone against UCF. Okay, sure. So that hurt his numbers. That's a wash. But he also had 5 TFLs. He had 5 1-yard touchdowns. That knocks your average down, but it's a touchdown, so who cares? But he also had 5 TFLs. So if we can limit some of those TFLs, and he's even more productive on a yards per carry basis, maybe those 10 touchdowns turn to 13 or 14, and maybe all of a sudden our 3.3 yard average as a team swells up to 3.5, 3.6. Yeah, there's not only were there moments of great production and you saw what we're capable of, but this is certainly also an area that we can certainly build on this. If you want to win championships, it starts by being a highly productive red zone team that scores touchdowns instead of settles for field goals. I always said the last thing you want is a Lou Groza candidate as your kicker. That's the last thing you want. Correct. Because you know the first thing I think when I see a Lou Groza candidate? Boy, that offense must have filled in the red zone a lot, because that guy drove a lot of field goals to the upright. So but yeah, that's the type of things that Garrett can bring, but we can get even better in this particular space.
No doubt. That is in a big way where championships are won is in the red zone for offenses and for defenses. The best offenses convert down there. The best defenses bow up and deny with their back to their own end zone. And I like the kind of what they've done well there and where it's worked, but still at the same time, some room for growth in that department. I think that's a good place to be, getting ready for camp here and heading into a new season. We've got one more break to get to. When we come back, we will wrap up this conversation on Garrett Greene, the runner, with some video, with some numbers on Garrett, the scrambler. We'll discuss all of that and more as we continue on this special edition of ITG. For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
ITG will be right back.
There goes Greene, scrambling, and that speed inside the 10, and he'll go all the way. Touchdown! Garrett Greene all the way to the end zone.
He's extremely dangerous with his legs. If you work the land, you just got to be a jack of all trades type. There's just too much to do. So if you got to be a welder or a farmer or a ditch digger, that's just who you are that day. Then tomorrow, you can be somebody else.
Get your Coyote at the new location of Johnston Equipment between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we roll along, coming down the home stretch here of this first part of the ITG Special Edition in-depth look at Garrett Greene, number 6 in your programs, but number 1 in your hearts and number 1 on your quarterback depth chart. So far, Jed, we've talked about Garrett Greene as a third down runner. Garrett Greene, the explosiveness and the ability in the midfield, and then Garrett Greene, the effectiveness in the red zone. So I guess the final element of this, right, for any quarterback as it relates to being a runner is your ability to avoid pressure, your wherewithal when things break down and you've got to make something out of nothing. So where does it begin for Garrett as it relates to the final part of this conversation?
That's maybe the biggest asset, is he can bail you out of so many things that otherwise might go south. You're going to see the connection between this and the low sack totals, the sack avoidance numbers that West Virginia, we flourished as a sack avoidance team last year. We really did. And it's unfair to compare what we did to some of the other national sack avoidance leaders. We're going to get into that very heavily in the passing episode. But of course, the O-line, the tight ends, and the backs play a prominent role in that. But so does Garrett. And one of the things that you're going to see in this final film breakdown, if you take the chance of dialing up a pressure package and trying to throw numbers at Garrett and come downhill and blitz him, you better get home. Because if you don't, there are huge creases and huge voids. If he escapes and gets outside and extends things, whether he's running it, as you'll see here, or next week, whether he's passing it, you really better get home. And it didn't serve defenses well to try and pressure him, but the sack avoidance numbers were off the hook, in part because Garrett's ability to escape trouble, to scramble out of those problems and avoid what otherwise might have been a sack, he turns into a positive play.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. It's probably the most difficult piece of this puzzle. It's the most exciting as a fan when your guy can do it, when your guy has the Houdini ability to make something out of nothing. And it's the most frustrating thing when you're playing a quarterback that it is that way as well too, where you feel like you got him so many times and he's just able to make one little move to get the extra half second that he needs to make a play. And so I'm interested to see the breakdown of this on Garrett Greene. Real quick before we get to the video, another thank you to our friends at Fortis and our good friend of the show, Rick Lewis, for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to make sure to visit fortis.us.com. Let's take a look here at some video on Garrett Greene, the scrambler.
West Virginia with a 1st and 10 at midfield, fourth quarter of a tight game against Oklahoma State. Ball on the right hash with trips to the left. The first thing to take note of here is WVU running unbalanced up front. Right tackle Doug Nestor has kicked over to line up in what would ordinarily be a tight end spot, while tight end Cole Taylor is attached to the guard over on the right in place of the right tackle. Because Taylor is the end man on the line of scrimmage, he's an eligible receiver. Why run unbalanced? Well, you always want to see what the defense does to adjust. It's a game plan specific wrinkle that offenses might uncork for multiple reasons. Maybe to test the eyes of the defense and disorient them, or to create some potential personnel advantages from a matchup standpoint. Maybe in the run game, maybe in the pass game. West Virginia motions the slot back into the boundary, leveling out the formation into a 2x2 set. The Cowboys will blitz from the field, turning this into a 4-man pass rush overall. West Virginia is going to fortify things by sliding its protection to the right, back toward that void created by the unbalanced alignment. It's worth noting that in slide protection, your running back is assigned with protecting against the edge of the defense away from the slide. Here, Jaheim is lined up to Garrett's right, but the play action fake carries him to the left, the side of his assigned pass pro responsibilities. And shout out to running backs coach Chad Scott here, because Jaheim comes out of the fake using solid technique against the blitzer, linebacker Xavier Benson. Since undersized running backs are often tangling with much larger defenders in pass protection, they're taught to take away the inside, as that's the fastest path to the quarterback. Jaheim does exactly that with the path he takes coming out of the fake. When Benson does engage him, Jaheim, giving up 7 inches and 30 pounds in this exchange, battles to redirect Benson's course over the top just enough to give Garrett a chance to escape underneath and turn on the Jets. Early in the Duke's Mayo Bowl versus Carolina, WVU facing a 3rd and long from deep in its own territory. With West Virginia pinned behind the sticks, the Tar Heels creep up into a 6-man pressure, playing a soft combo coverage behind it, parking their back-end defenders near the first down marker. From the wide side of the field to Garrett's right, UNC brings nickelback Caleb Cost. This should have been picked up by West Virginia, but it wasn't, and Cost came screaming off the edge uncontested. From the pass pocket in the end zone, Garrett spotted Cost at the last second and immediately went backyard football on him, leaving the former 4-star recruit sliding on his face as Garrett turned the corner upfield into the kind of open space that you'll only see against a defense featuring man coverage concepts and didn't get home on a blitz. This is where Garrett Greene might be most lethal, when he escapes against a defense inclined to bring pressure with man coverage behind it, which he does often. 1st and 10 early in the game at TCU. Left hash, WVU goes trips right. Out of their odd stacked base, TCU goes with 3 down linemen. Linebacker Jamoy Hodge helps out with a delayed blitz. More on that in a minute. The Frogs cap the coverage with safety help on the back end and splatter underneath with man coverage. The pocket holds up, but Hodge comes clean through a gap, forcing Garrett to eject. He escapes to the left, finds daylight, and turns on the Jets, taking it to the house. Hodge is crafty on this blitz. Right guard Brandon Yates eyes him up, but Hodge just hovers with a nothing to see here posture, acting like he might be in coverage. As soon as Yates turns away to help right tackle Doug Nestor by ear-holing defensive end Paul Oyewale, Hodge fires through the open window, quickly closing on Garrett. Garrett immediately looks for an escape route and sees that defensive contain to the left has completely evaporated, with boundary tackle Caleb Fox getting gobbled up in a double team by Wyatt Milam and Tomas Remak. Greene seizes on the opportunity to his left, showing his burst and outrunning Hodge to the perimeter before cutting upfield into open space. Lots of open space. Another prime example of what happens to a defense that lets a quarterback like Garrett Greene break free against defenders scattered in man coverage. West Virginia at Houston. The Mountaineers facing 3rd down and a long 9. The Cougars rush 3 and drop numbers into coverage, this time deploying linebacker Latravion McCutcheon as a spy. McCutcheon can offer modest help with any shallow crossers right over the ball, but his principal assignment is to offset Garrett Greene's threat as a runner. Mission not accomplished. Takes the snap and is looking for tight end Cole Taylor on the backside to his left, but seeing Taylor double teamed, Garrett steps up in the pocket, still scanning the Houston coverage. McCutcheon jumps with his hands in the air, anticipating a throw. Garrett sees this and immediately escapes upfield past McCutcheon before the linebacker can reposition himself to make a play. 3rd and long at Oklahoma. West Virginia motions trips to the field wide right. The Sooners dial up a 6-man pressure, chopping up the front with a stunt and blitzing linebackers behind it. With the pocket getting pushed onto his lap to the right, Garrett doesn't see Cole Taylor slipping into the flat with no defender within 10 yards. Garrett manages to escape the scrum and makes his way up the sidelines to his left for the conversion on a sneaky pickup of 15. This one was 1 part pocket awareness and 2 parts Houdini. A very athletic OU pass rush had Garrett surrounded like bobcats in a phone booth, but he broke free and found the narrow path to success, moving the chains.
There it is, the Signal Callers breakdown of Garrett Greene, the scrambler. And Jed, I mean, big pickups, key first downs, all these, as we kind of get to the end here, in a lot of ways, these are intertwined and kind of work in the same ecosystem for Garrett Greene, the runner.
And you might have noticed just by watching that video how excited I was, because I broke down far more plays in that one than in the previous videos.
Sure.
And part of it's just the fascination, and that's something I could never do. I mean, I'm watching this guy, and I'm just thinking, not many can. I mean, that's a special skill, and to be able to do that and escape trouble and build your offense out and give yourself a second chance. And we saw examples in the video, Wes, of irrespective of whether teams brought pressure and didn't get home, Garrett was just better than the guy that was unblocked as a blitzer in some cases. And he made the defense pay for it, sometimes in big ways, like against the TCU in the TCU game with a touchdown. But then even when Houston, I mean, poor Doug is just trying to do what he can to keep third and long. You get Garrett into third and long, and Houston dials up. It's not really a pressure package. They're trying to spy him with an athletic linebacker, and he just kind of pump fakes the guy, zips right by him. How do you win? I mean, it just makes it very difficult. But when you break down the numbers, there's a host of reasons that Garrett might, in fact, decide to scramble, decide to extend a play, decide to look downfield and make something happen with his legs. It might be because of pressure. We saw some of that on the tape. It might be because of coverage. I mean, sometimes nobody's open, and your rhythm as a quarterback, your mental clock says, I got to escape, hit the escape hatch and jettison out of here. Sometimes there's a hole in the zone. You might spot it and just see an opportunity and go. And so there's examples of all those types of things, but let's get into some of the numbers, Wes. The numbers, again, support what you just watched on that tape, and that's when I love numbers, when they support film study. Okay, I looked at both PFF, Pro Football Focus, and I looked at SIS, Sports Info Solutions. The numbers were very similar in terms of what they had Garrett scramble figure at. PFF had him at 40 scrambles for the year, which was most in the Big 12. SIS had him at 37, second most in the Big 12. Either way, he's right there toward the top of guys in this league that scramble and escape trouble and get out of it. Now, this is not a dispute. You remember earlier when we said he rushed for 772 yards, almost 800? 361 of those yards came on scrambles. Plays like you just watched. Now, here might be some of the most impressive parts. He averaged, when he scrambled, 9 yards a carry. Number one in the entire Big 12. So when he does it, you pay for it. You better get home when you bring pressure on him. Because if he takes off for a reason. And then finally, he scrambled for 20 first downs. 20 first downs. I said earlier, I made the reference to you never have to make the perfect call. When you have a guy like this, it doesn't have to be a perfect call. It can be a very imperfect call, and he can make it perfect by virtue of his skill set. But when you look for scrambles that were converted into a first down, Garrett's number was 54%. 54% of the time he took off. And when you look at all Power 5 passers, all Power 5 quarterbacks, those that had more than 15 scrambles on the year, so in effect the starters, that's number one. His 54% first down rate was number one. Once again, you don't have to call the perfect play. 4 things that Garrett can do to avoid sacks. This goes back into the sack avoidance conversation. You can throw it away from inside the pocket, which we'll discuss next week. You can escape the pocket and throw it away. You can scramble for yards, which he did, as we said, most in the Big 12 on scrambles, or you can scramble to extend a play and push the football downfield. Garrett does all 4 of those things that a quarterback can do to escape sacks. So, yes, this is an area of his game that I think it's most exciting. Whether he decides to run it, he obviously decides, the numbers support the fact he decides to run it for a reason. He decides to run it with force. There's production when he takes off with the football. But as we'll talk about next week, I give some examples of, he also now understands or appreciates that's where the big plays happen in the pass game. Sometimes you can escape, and it looks very much like these when he escapes man pressure or man packages, blitz packages, and takes off upfield. Sometimes he decides not to take off upfield. He just extends the play. But this is the part of his game, I think you can tell just by my energy right now, that probably excites me the most, again, because I can't relate to it. I don't understand it at all. I'm just so envious watching this, thinking, dude, I mean, you had to time me with a sundial. I was slower than a molasses drip in January. You fill in whatever adage you want there. I only had my head and my arm. That's all I had. Garrett has this full complement of skills that so many other quarterbacks just don't have. And there's so many things possible if he continues to refine his game in this area, but also in the pass game area, which we'll break down in the next episode about Garrett.
Watching Garrett Greene, the runner, and the scrambler for you, it's like watching Charles Wesley Godwin for me.
Hey, this is Charles Wesley Godwin, and you are in the gun.
You know, I mean, I can play guitar, Jed, but I can't play guitar like that. All right, I mean, you know, it ain't the same sport that we're playing there. I'll tell you that much for sure. Yeah. So that was fantastic. I mean, big shout out to you again. I made the joke about spent more time on this than any homework assignment you had at the beginning of the episode. But at the same time, there was some truth in that as well, too. I know you've put a lot of time into this. I think it all has been great here so far. I'm excited to see what you've got cooked up for the second episode of this special 2-part series here. So yeah, there's Garrett Greene, the runner, in the books. And in the following days here, we will have Garrett Greene, the passer, coming your way before too long as well. Last thing to do before we get out of here, a final thank you to our friends at Johnson Equipment. Make sure you're visiting their new location on Route 33 just outside of Weston. And, of course, be an ear and tell an ear about your favorite Garrett Greene breakdown, about your new favorite WVU football podcast. That's the one thing that we ask of you before we get out of here, is to be an ear and tell an ear about ITG. For our producer / co-host extraordinaire, Skylar, the beer truck, Big O, the signal caller, Jed Drenning, I'm Wes Euler. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Part 2 on GG in this special edition coming at you soon. You've been in the gun.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
Tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.